Today, in parts of Asia, people from all walks of life are choosing to be stung by bees, often dozens of times in one sitting. Shou-Rong Chen is battling multiple sclerosis, a disease which slowly causes the body's nerves to deteriorate.
For 6 months, I was bedridden. I could not move. I would have symptoms of tingling and numbness in my hands. It was excruciating pain.
Then, Shou-Rong heard about bee sting therapy. For help, she turned to Mr. Cheng Yi Chen, bee sting therapy master, a trained master who has practiced bee sting therapy for 12 years. Every week, Mr. Chen and his assistants treat 200 patients and sacrifice 6,000 honeybees. The results, he says, can be astounding.
After 600 bees, you will look 5 years younger than your contemporaries.
But can bee stings really help Shou-Rong fight multiple sclerosis? She began an intensive course of therapy, receiving over 200 stings a week for months on end. Honeybees only sting once, and they die soon after. But even separated from the bee, the stinger continues to inject venom into its victim. The body responds with a flood of histamines and white blood cells. And soon the area becomes hot, red, swollen, and itchy.
He gives me one sting. I don't even have time to feel the pain before he stings me again, and the pain lasts for 1 hour.
Many think it is based on the 5,000-year-old practice of acupuncture, a proven treatment for pain. Although today Mr. Chen sees bee acupuncture as a labor of love, even he once considered it taboo. In fact, like most of us, he was afraid of bees. 30 years ago, Mr. Chen was an executive for a textiles company. Then his wife began to suffer from arthritic pains so severe she couldn't cook or even stand up straight. Western medicines didn't do much good, but when she told her husband she wanted to get stung by bees, he thought the idea was ridiculous.
Naturally, as an educated man, I was against it. We just did not understand bees.
But Mr. Chen completely changed his mind when he saw his wife's sudden improvement.
After 3 months, her red blood cell count increased. Her headache disappeared. I was so surprised, I decided to dive into this mysterious treatment and collect all the information that I could.
Mr. Chen vowed to devote his life to bringing bee sting therapy to others. After 6 months of bee sting therapy, Shou-Rong Chen has seen a dramatic change. She insists the therapy has relieved her multiple sclerosis and given her a new lease on life. While most Western-trained doctors would likely say her illness is in remission, Shou-Rong is convinced the stings have helped her walk again. It will take years of study before we'll know whether bee stings can relieve arthritis or multiple sclerosis, or even the common cold. But whether Shou-Rong's recovery is in her head or her hands and feet, for the first time in more than a year, she feels she can resume living. A therapy most of us would find taboo is allowing her to face the future with renewed hope.
The world seems to have an insatiable appetite for oil, electricity, and natural gas. But now, due to energy costs and global warming, scientists are looking to the wind, sun, and agricultural products to power our future. According to some researchers, wind power is becoming a more viable energy source.
I think the past perception was that wind energy was nice, but not a real solution. That perception is changing. I see wind energy getting more and more competitive.
At the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado, discovering alternative power sources that are competitive with fossil fuels has been a mission of scientists since the U.S. energy crisis of the 1970s. Scientists here also create solar cells that are far more efficient than those currently available to the public. They believe that the market for this technology is about to increase significantly.
Recent polls have shown that about 75% of the population would favor the use of solar power, clean power, and would like to see more of it happening.
Solar power has been around for centuries, but while the public says they like the idea of harnessing solar power and incorporating it into their daily lives, the reality for many seems to be that it's something reserved for the future, not now.
Sometimes, you worry that they think that this is only a fringe, but it's not. Photovoltaic, solar electricity, is becoming a technology that is becoming cost-effective for us as consumers in the United States.
In many people's opinions, it often takes a crisis for things to change.
When your electricity doesn't come on in California, you start looking very, very quickly.
For some, home use of solar power is now becoming more than just an abstract idea. When Jonathan Sawyer's solar electric system was first installed, it was believed to be the largest residential solar system in the United States. This is likely due to the fact that solar power had not been widely promoted at the time. It's so efficient that he actually sells electricity back to his local power company.
I also feel good because I've always been committed about the environment and doing something, and we have to start as individuals to do things.
But individuals can only do so much. Researchers claim that for renewable energy to truly make a difference, it must be used on a large scale.
This is a solar concentrator. The mirrors focus the sun's rays into a narrow beam, which turns an engine and provides electricity. Have to get in the backyard, sure, but a power company could probably find a place for it.
The United States and other countries often lacked a great sense of urgency to find energy alternatives. For decades, gasoline prices had been kept low with government subsidies, so people continued driving large cars, usually alone. Nowadays, gasoline costs are higher, which has enhanced the need to find something else to fuel all those vehicles.
What's in there now is a material that looks like straw and it's actually the material that farmers just leave sitting on the ground after they go through and they harvest corn. We're trying to get farmers to collect this material so that we can run it through conversion technology to make new liquid fuels.
Since the energy crisis of the 1970s, many farmers have been turning food into fuel by using grains like corn to create ethanol. But recently, some of the emphasis on making fuel has been moving away from the grain itself to the stalks and stubble left on the ground after the harvest.
The cellulose that's in here that actually is made up of sugars is something that they can turn into ethanol in the same way that they're currently taking their corn grain and having it turned into fuel-grade ethanol.
The National Renewable Energy Laboratory has a manufacturing area that is capable of converting harvest leftovers, and just about anything else, into fuel.
What are some of these other materials here?
Well, some of these, like this, for example, is a wood material.
Proving that sustainable energy technology is actually viable remains a struggle, at least in the United States. Wind turbines, which were pioneered in the United States, are now being used by several countries in Europe to supply meaningful amounts of power.
The cost of energy in the United States is so low compared to Europe that our industry has had a harder time competing with fossil fuels.
The cost of fuel in many countries has increased significantly over the past few years. While it has caused hardship for many, this cost increase may also increase the urgency to find reliable fossil fuel alternatives and thereby reduce the greenhouse gases that cause global warming. The time for alternative energy may have arrived, and for those who use it, the future may be now.
In the country of Argentina, cowboy life has scarcely changed over the past 3 centuries. The gaucho is a hero here. For most people, he is a legendary figure that is larger than life. But in the far reaches of the country, there are still men for whom the gaucho is more than a legend. For them, it is their life. They are the gauchos of Argentina. The cowboy life of the gaucho came to Argentina from Spanish culture. It created a unique type of men who were as hardy and self-reliant as the animals for which they cared. The word gaucho means outcast, or one who doesn't belong to a specific society or group. There are as many kinds of gauchos as there are varied terrains in Argentina. There are gauchos on the soft, flat pampas of Corrientes, on the windswept plains of Patagonia, and in the wooded hills of Salta. Don Jose Anzola, a 76-year-old horseman, seems to be the classic gaucho, and one who treasures his residence in a remote region of Corrientes. He believes solitude helps to keep gaucho life in its purest form.
Si no pudiera vivir en el campo,
if I couldn't live in the campo, the countryside, an unthinkable thought. I don't know what I'd do.
According to Don Jose, he would rather live in a poor little house in the country than in a palace in the city. Don Jose's 154-square-mile ranch in Corrientes is far from everything, so Don Jose depends entirely on his horses to travel. As a result, he and his 3 sons spend much of their time finding and catching the wild horses that run free in the countryside. The horses must then be broken so that they'll allow people to ride them.
Breaking a horse is a slow process, taking more than a year. This is something the horse learns to put up with.
The gaucho explains that the horse must adjust to using a saddle and reins, so the riders aren't thrown off later. The treatment seems cruel, but according to Don Jose, it's actually not. The training, he says, often seems harsher than it is.
We love our horses, and in the end they love us in return. This is the traditional way of training a horse in Argentina, the gaucho way.
Being a gaucho, though, is more than a life of solitude and caring for horses and cattle. The gaucho way of life has its own strict code of ethics. Hospitality and respect for others are as much a part of this lifestyle as the art of breaking horses. Argentina is nearly the last place where this code of ethics and the demanding lifestyle of the gaucho still exist. The country is home to nearly 150,000 gauchos who are very much a part of the national identity. There are gauchos in all parts of the country, even more than 1,200 miles south of Buenos Aires, on the edge of Antarctica in Patagonia. The harsh terrain of this region has its own type of gaucho as well. Here, the gauchos raise sheep, not cattle, and even more surprisingly, many speak English. Many of the ancestors of Patagonian gauchos were immigrants from Scotland. Several of these settlers came to the area during the 19th century, including the ancestors of Eduardo Halliday and his father Jimmy. These 2 gauchos run a ranch in Patagonia, and for them, this strange terrain seems like the perfect place to live. The Hallidays enjoy living in the region for a number of reasons. For Jimmy, the most refreshing aspect about living in Patagonia is that there's space everywhere so he can see far in all directions. The land is also rich, he says, and produces everything that he and his family need. Life on the plains of Patagonia is difficult, even harsh, but the gauchos here have learned how to adjust and succeed. Eduardo has lived his entire life on the family ranch and has learned the traditional ways from his father. The goal of every gaucho is self-reliance, and these gauchos of Patagonia are no different. Because the ranch is so remote, father and son have to utilize everything they have available. This also means they don't abandon anything quickly, and often use and reuse everything they have, including their bags and their boots. After all, it's a long way to go to buy new ones. Gauchos are experts at adjusting to their surroundings. Here they've learned to use a local weapon called a boleadora. Made of leather and small stones, boleadoras are still used to hunt rhea. Pursuing the small flightless birds is no problem, but hitting them can be tough. As the gauchos fly like the wind along the plains on their strong horses, the rheas run swiftly ahead of them. It's an exciting chase, but the rheas get away, this time. About 1,800 miles north of Patagonia is the region of Salta. Here, the stony hills and rough terrain have produced yet a different kind of gaucho. The gauchos here were once fierce soldiers for Argentina, and they won recognition and respect in the Argentine War of Independence from Spain. They're famous for their huge leather chaps and red ponchos, and often celebrate their proud traditions in an annual parade. One of the best horsemen in the area is Rudecindo Campos. Rudecindo loves being a gaucho, and he says that it's the life he's always wanted.
In life, there are all kinds of people, engineers, doctors, and gauchos. I knew I had to choose one or the other. I have always had a gaucho soul, and I like being a gaucho.
However, choosing the life of a gaucho means more than just working with horses. Just as it is in Corrientes, a strict code of ethics and principles is essential to the gaucho lifestyle in Salta as well.
It's not only knowing how to catch an animal with a rope, use a saddle, or ride a horse. It's also about being good and kind. When you ask a gaucho a favor, he must not refuse. He does it.
At times, it's difficult to make enough money working as a gaucho. In order to survive, Rudecindo must work at a part-time job so he can continue training horses. He specializes in training a strong little horse from the area called a criollo. It's one of the few animals that can round up cattle in this rough terrain covered with thorns. To protect themselves from the environment, horse and rider rely on their special leather chaps. The thick leather protects the pair from injuries as they round up the last of the cattle. In Salta, each time the gauchos successfully return the cattle safely back to the ranch, there's a lively fiesta, a celebration in which women have always had an important role. Rudecindo's wife, who comes from the city, talks about life on the ranch.
It's very difficult to adapt to the slower pace of the campo. In the city, you live faster and you're less attentive to nature. We've lost that in the city. We've lost some of our humanity, which my husband hasn't lost. He's not caught up in the trivia of everyday life. You can really get consumed by small things, and you forget what's important.
If I go into town for 2 weeks, I can't wait to get home. To the horses, to the smell of the countryside and the wet earth after a rain. I love this life.
In the end, the story of today's gaucho may be one of adaptation to climate, to landscape, and to traditional ways of life that sustain them.
For Argentina, it's very important for people to treasure this proud and honorable legacy. We must be sure that whatever else happens to us, we never lose our heritage, our gaucho way of life.
Don Jose is not alone in his dream. The proud and self-reliant gauchos of Corrientes, Patagonia, and Salta are all helping to retain the traditional lifestyle of the gauchos of Argentina.
New Delhi is a large city in northern India. The air here can be so dirty that it's sometimes difficult to see the city. The water supply doesn't look much better. The Yamuna River runs through the city. Every day, 50 million gallons of chemicals are put into the river. This river is the city's main source of drinking water. The 14 million people in and around New Delhi must get their water from community water trucks. These trucks distribute water to the places where people live. Sometimes there's enough water for everyone, and sometimes there isn't. The people of New Delhi require about 1 billion gallons of water a day. They only receive about 25% of that. In the rich parts of the city, you'll find busy shopping centers, well-dressed shoppers, and expensive restaurants, but their water still comes on trucks. Outside of Delhi, in the region of Rajasthan, getting water is even harder. The temperatures frequently reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit, or 50 degrees Celsius. People have to walk for miles to get water from a well. Then they often have to drink next to their animals. Once a year, there is a lot of rain during a time called the monsoon season. But people need water all year. What can India do to solve its water problems? Some in the government say the answer is to build more big dams. But many people disagree with that idea. They think that India's dams have made the water problem worse by drying up rivers and wells.
Thousands of millions of rupees have already been invested in water policy and big dams. How do you explain villages with no water? Who is responsible for all this? Well, the blame lies on the very system which advocates the construction of bigger dams.
A man named Rajendra Singh has a different idea to solve the problem. He started an organization that works with people in the villages to make clean water easily available. He teaches them to build very small dams to store water and change the land. People in the Alwar region decided to try Singh's idea. They began collecting stone and rock and made small earthen dams. They then made small holes near them and covered them with stone, earth, and clay. This stopped rainwater from running off and raised the level of the water under the ground. Every time it rained, the groundwater level got higher. The people made wells to bring water to their farms, and soon water reached every part of the village. Today, a village that was dry and lifeless is green and healthy. Because of two small earthen dams, farmers who couldn't grow enough food for their families can now produce food for them. And the idea has spread.
We're building water reservoirs and dams to save rainwater. We want our village Rozda to be green and prosperous like Nimi.
Now, more than 4,000 small earthen dams collect rainwater across western India. They provide water for more than 800 communities.